Good afternoon from Jakarta. Thank you for joining the ACE webinar series on the 5th ASEAN Energy Outlook that will be organized starting in November until December 2017. Let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Rio John Peter Silitonga. I'm Technical Officer for the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, APEC, in ASEAN Centre for Energy. I will be serving as your moderator and guide you throughout this webinar series. So, before we go further, I would like to introduce the ASEAN Centre for Energy in a brief. The ASEAN Centre for Energy is an international intergovernmental organization which is established in 1999 by 10 ASEAN member states. The ASEAN Centre for Energy is the center to facilitate, to initiate, and implement the energy cooperation in ASEAN. The center has a vision to be a think tank, energy data and knowledge hub, and also the catalyst on energy cooperation in ASEAN member states. A lot of activities and initiatives has been conducted by the ASEAN Centre for Energy, as you can see on the slide, such as policy, regulatory frameworks and technologies, policy research, analytics, energy database, APEC initiative including dialogue partners and international organizations, and also secretariat functions for energy cooperation meeting in ASEAN. As you may be aware that this is the second webinar of 4 webinar series that will be organized by the ASEAN Centre for Energy in cooperation with the international organizations. So, as you can see in the slide, so we are here now. So the focus of the second of this webinar today will be focused on the new era for gas imports in ASEAN. So there will be two webinar series that will be held in the coming week. So hopefully we can also get your participations in the series of webinars that will be held in the next week for coming. And we're targeting audience for our webinars and disseminations, informations for energy regulators, policymakers on energy sectors, energy researchers, academia, and also private sectors. And we have been starting these webinars from 22nd November 2017 and expected to be concluded in 13th December 2017. And all the webinars will be starting 2 until 3 p.m. on Jakarta time. As you may be aware that we have expected outputs from our webinar series today. The first one, we want to use this platform as a dissemination of the key findings of the 5th ASEAN Energy Outlook, which launched at the 35th ASEAN Ministry on Energy meeting AMEM in 2017. The Outlook provides policymakers and stakeholders in the Association of South Asian Nation ASEAN with an understanding of mid and long-term energy and environmental related challenges up to 2040. The second expected output, we also would like to identify the pathways to address the recommendation of the IU5 for the sustainable goals as asserted in the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, APEC 2017. And we hope also the webinar series, we can get the international and intra-regional horizon, and we can discuss on how ASEAN achieved the APEC 2016-2025. So point of views and suggestions from these webinars are really much welcome in order to give us a hint, to give us an input on how we can also moving forward on the direction and recommendation that have been described in the IO5 of ASEAN Centre for Energy. And let me briefly go through the agenda of our today's webinar. So we will have our today's webinar in 1 hour webinars. So we will have 2 speakers and also 2 panelists, and at the end of the webinar or 3 p.m. will be have a recap and a wrap up on what the discussion raised during our webinar series today. And let me introduce a brief about our speakers for our today's webinar. First one, we have first speakers, Mr. Paramet Ho-Seong Wang. He is a manager, strategy and corporate planning department at the PTT Public Company Limited, PTT, Thailand. He earned his master's degree in engineering management and his business administration both from University of Technology, Sydney, Australia. Since February 2015, he has been assigned by PTT to work for ASEAN Council on Petroleum Secretariat team, which PTT hosts from 2015-2019. Mr. Ho-Seong Wang will discuss one of ASEAN regional energy projects, the Trans-Asean-Gas pipeline. The second speakers for our today's webinar, we have Mr. Pinto Anugrah, obtained his Bachelor of Engineering in 2015 and Master of Engineering in 2016 from Universitas Gadjah Mada, Indonesia. He is a technical officer for policy research and analytics program of ASEAN Centre for Energy, where he coordinates the data and models in the development of the 5th ASEAN Energy Outlook, IO5. Mr. Anugrah will discuss ASEAN future dependency on natural gas as projected in the IO5. We also have two panelists for our today's webinar. The first one, Mr. Michael Okanda Sinurkus, Senior Researcher, Asia Pacific Energy Research Centers. And then the second panelist, Mr. Edi Saputra, as a Senior Energy Analyst with Mackenzie. And before we go further to the details of the key findings of the rise of the gas demand that will be presented by Mr. Pinto Anugrah, let me just bring you a brief into the key figures of the rise of gas demand according to the 5th ASEAN Energy Outlook. So it's projected there is a gas production growth around 1.3% per year in the period of 2007 until 2016. And on the side of total primary energy supply, the growth also is projected about 3.5% annually. This is due to the increased both pipeline and liquefied natural gas or LNG. So let's figure out the details of the trends of the gas demand and supply in ASEAN's region that will be presented by Mr. Pinto later on. And due to your participation and also your active inputs and also suggestions to the key findings of the IFAB, really important. So we would like to encourage you to address your questions and also please address to which speaker that you want your question to be addressed. You can see on the chat box of the GoToWebinar applications. So you can tap your question and you put your name and also where you come from, in order we can, and then we can identify the question and we can address to the speakers that you want your question to be addressed. So without further ado, I would like to hand over the session to Mr. Pinto Anugrah.
Yeah.
Hello,
Mr.
Pinto Anugrah, the time is yours. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Rio. Thanks for your kind introduction. And good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to everyone from all over, from wherever you are. Very warm welcome to our audience to attend this ACE webinar series on the 5th ASEAN Energy Outlook. It's just recently published this year. My name is Pinto Anugrah. I'm a technical officer for Policy Research and Analytics program, the ASEAN Centre for Energy. And today we are going to focus our discussion with the key findings from the AO5 on the future of gas in ASEAN. So as you can see here, this is one of the pictures taken from the launch of the 5th ASEAN Energy Outlook with the Philippine Secretary of Energy, Afonso Cusi, in Manila last September 2017. But first, I would like to briefly talk about our development approach in AO5. there are 4 approaches that are being used, as already mentioned in the slides that you can see right now in the screen. First one is a cooperative approach. AO5 was developed based on strong cooperation, coordination, interaction, and integration between the ACE and AO5 working group consists of statisticians and outlook experts from the 10 ASEAN member states. I would like to also mention that this outlook was supported by our partners GIZ and Fraunhofer ISI. And we also harmonized the energy system models using the same projection methodology. Then the AMS projection were reviewed by computing a set of sensitivities. An independent regional model was created to validate and control the results. Lastly, all data, process, and results were reported in consultation with ASEAN Regional Energy Policy and Planning Subsector Network, or we know as REPP-SSN focal points, for their validation and confirmation, as well as their guidelines were used for alignment with the region's priorities and goals under the APIC document. And this is the 3 scenarios that we developed in the IO5. The first one is BAU, or business as usual, projects the future development of ASEAN energy systems, given no significant changes to past practices. And the second scenario, the AMS target scenario, or we call it ATS, projects the future development of ASEAN energy systems in a target-based scenario, assuming all of officially issued energy policies and targets, in particular in EE, energy efficiency, and renewable energy targets at a national level, are fully attained. Then the third scenario, ASEAN progressive scenario, is the APS. We assume that a higher ambition level, especially in energy efficiency and renewable energy technologies, where APIC targets on E and RE are fully attained. Now this picture shows the country's landscape on energy mix in ASEAN, where we can see that the development from 2005 to 2015, our base year in this AO5, and then our projection period in 2025, we still expected to see that the 5 major countries in ASEAN, which is Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, and Philippines, account for more than 90% of energy share in the region. And this landscape also captured the economic structure of these ASEAN member states. But if we are talking about natural gas, Indonesia and Malaysia are the main players in ASEAN. These 2 countries, these 2 member states, have more than 2/3 of the region's natural gas reserves, while their total gas production in these 2 member states was around more than 200 billion cubic meters. So that we can conclude that Indonesia and Malaysia will be the major exporter of gas, not only in the region but also in the world. And another major players in gas export in ASEAN is Brunei, Darussalam, and Myanmar. These 2 member states, despite their gas production and export in terms of volume, are small compared to Indonesia and Malaysia, but in terms of their export share, they export more than or around 90% of their natural gas production. On the contrary, we can see that Singapore and Thailand are the main importer of gas. These 2 member states import gas from other countries within the ASEAN or outside the ASEAN region, especially if we Singapore, they're currently expanding its existing LNG import facilities as they are aiming to be major LNG trading hub. And we also can see, I also can say that Vietnam and Philippines are 2 member states that have quite self-sufficient in terms of natural gas, because their production and their domestic consumption can be met by their production. And then we move to another finding from AO5, which is the TPS projection, total primary energy supply. We can see that the TPS will considerably increase during the projection period until 2014. If we focus on natural gas is mainly used in the industrial sector and for power generation, although some small amount are also consumed in transport sector. But in the industry, natural gas will triple in 2040. and this accounts for 1/3 of industrial energy consumption of the region in 2014. Currently, natural gas is the second largest source of energy after oil. Indonesia, Thailand, and Malaysia again were recorded as the largest natural gas consumer in the region, which account for around 90% of region's total consumption of natural gas. Then if we move to natural gas in power capacity, this is the whole picture of power capacity in ASEAN. We projected that natural gas as today is the highest installed capacity in ASEAN, but over the projection period, natural gas will approximately outstrip by coal in around 2020. This picture shows that the natural gas production versus the natural gas requirement in ASEAN. As we know that natural gas is produced by several ASEAN member states, and I also already mentioned in the beginning of my presentation. However, the region has seen no significant discovery after the East Natuna Alpha gas field, which is the expected single largest resource in the region. As Natuna block is still not in the production, the combined total future primary production of natural gas we projected to be decreased by around 0.6% on average every year. Despite natural gas production is currently still above the requirements, you can see that the projected gas production will not meet the projected demand in all scenarios. In BAU, the demand will exceed the production in 2020, while the reduction of demand in ATS will delay this until 2025, and APS can postpone it to 2029. But in all these three scenarios, it is a clear message that against the background of this anticipated energy strategy, there will be a strong import dependency for natural gas in the future in ASEAN. So the total primary production of natural gas is projected to decrease slightly, reaching around 85% of the present production level in 2040, which corresponds to around 177 billion cubic meters. By 2040, ASEAN will be a net importer of natural gas. However, if we compare these three scenarios, BAU imports are 4 times bigger than APS, reflecting the clear benefit of enhancing energy efficiency and renewable energy to ASEAN's import dependency. Then, if we look at the reserve to production ratio, this indicates the years until the reserve will be depleted if no additional resources are discovered. If we compare natural gas with other source of fossil fuel sources like coal and oil, coal is we can expect coal is to deplete only in around 60 years from now, but natural gas, the depletion of gas reserves in ASEAN member states, even those such as Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, Darussalam, and Myanmar, can be anticipated within the next few decades, but in overall ASEAN will deplete the natural gas resource by around 15 to 20 years from now. That's all my presentation. Thank you very much for your time. And if anyone would like to download this publication of the 5th ASEAN Energy Outlook, you can look at our website in www.aseanenergy.org. Thank you very much. Now I'll give it back to our moderator, Mr. Rio.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pinto Anugrah, for sharing with us what on the trend of gas supply and demand, also the reserve capacity of ASEAN gas supply. So I would like now to invite the second speakers, Mr. Paramet Hoi Sung Wang, the Chairman Policy and Research Study from ASCOP. Mr. Paramet, the time is yours. Mr. Pramit, please. Yeah. Mr. Pramit, please start now. Please unmute yours. Mr. Pramit, please unmute your microphone so we can hear your voice. So we'll be. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So sorry for this little problem. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the time to share about the Trans-ASEAN gas pipeline and the gas import dependency. First of all, I would like to start my presentation with the introduction of the scope to give you the background and to see the linkage between the scope and how the member can work together to share the same objective for the Trans-ASEAN Gas Pipeline project. As for the scope, it stands for the ASEAN Council on Petroleum, and our organization, the scope, was established in the year 1975 to be an instrument for regional cooperation on the petroleum and energy matters among the ASEAN member countries. So from this slide, you can see that we have 10 member of the national oil companies. For example, from Brunei, we have the Petroleum Brunei, we have the Ministry of Mine and Electricity as the representative from the Cambodia, we have Pertamina from Indonesia, Laos State Fuel from Laos, we have Petronas from Malaysia, and from Myanmar, we have Myanmar Oil and Gas Enterprise, and from Philippines, we have PNOC, and from Singapore, we have the SLNG, and from Thailand, we have PTT, and from Vietnam, we have Petro Vietnam. So all of these 10 national oil companies, they send the representatives to work together for this Trans-ASEAN Gas Pipeline project. And for the Trans-ASEAN Gas Pipeline project, this is one of the most significant of the ASCO project that have the envision to establish the interconnecting arrangement of the natural gas in the ASEAN to ensure that we have the greater security and sustainability of energy supply in this region. And for this TAGP, all the members conducting the study and create the master plan that would prepare for to serve as the blueprint of the action in undertaking the gas pipeline project, that we will have the natural gas pipeline connecting all the 10 nations in the ASEAN together. And right now, we also conducting the study to explore the relating necessary regulation frameworks such as the open access, the gas transit principle to send the gas from one country to another country, and also the gas specification harmonization to ensure that all the natural gas that gonna send through this Trans-ASEAN gas pipeline can be delivered and be used by all of the countries in the ASEAN. And right now for the Trans-ASEAN gas pipeline, as you can see from this map, it shows the green pipeline and the red pipeline. And let me explain about the red pipeline. For the red pipeline is the domestic gas pipeline that each country lay the pipeline, and then they're gonna use the natural gas for domestic market only. And if we look at the green pipeline, this called the bilateral pipeline that would form as a part of the Trans-ASEAN gas pipeline. And currently we have the 13 Trans-ASEAN gas net pipeline connecting the around 3,600 kilometers. So right now we have 13 green pipeline that send the gas from one country to another country. And in the past, we foresee that this green pipeline network would bring the gas probably from the Natuna, Indonesia, as the big resources in the ASEAN. And we will connect the green pipeline to the Natuna field and deliver the gas through this green network to all of the ASEAN. However, from the development of the Natuna, we see that it's very challenging for the high percentage of the CO2. And right now, the Indonesian government, they have the policy that for the gas from the Natuna block, it will be used only for the domestic purpose. So that's why we have to find another gas resource to be the part of the natural gas supply to this Trans-ASEAN Gas Pipeline project. That's why for some country in the ASEAN, they look for new option that try to find the natural gas to use for their own country. That's why you can see in the table on the top hand right, we can see that around 6 LNG receiving terminal is built and operated in the ASEAN country. And right now, the ASEAN member country, some country already import the LNG with the total capacity around 28 million tons per annum. This is another option to as a supplement to TAGP to use for the natural gas supply. And if we look at the gas import dependency, and from this map we can see for the whole 10 ASEAN country, we can see that some country are the natural gas export. For example, if we look at the Myanmar, we can see on the blue bar is the domestic production, and on the red bar it is the domestic consumption. So we can see that when the country have more production, so they can export to another country. For example, Myanmar can export the gas through the green pipeline in the previous slide to Thailand. And for some countries such as Malaysia, they also have more supply than their own demand, so they can export the gas through the pipeline to Singapore or to Thailand, or even they have the LNG plant to export the natural gas to other countries. So currently in the ASEAN, we can see the production about 20,000 million standard cubic feet per day, and for the consumption is around 15,000 million standard cubic feet per day. However, for the future, we can see that the consumption of the natural gas in this region will keep increasing. So that's why we have to think about how we can cope with this higher demand in the future. So in the year 2012, the ESCO members have discussed and agreed that we will expand the strategic focus of the Trans-ASEAN Gas Pipeline from being limited to just only connecting via the physical gas pipeline to include the connectivity via the regasification terminals. Therefore, we see that LNG can serve as the virtual pipeline. So the ESCO has discussed the idea of the LNG destination flexibility, that we can see that ASEAN could be one of the LNG destination, which means the LNG, once they come into this ASEAN region, it can be freely delivered to any country in the Southeast ASEAN without any restriction. Therefore, for the ESCO, we initiated to study, to explore the possibility of this concept. And right now, the ESCO is working closely with the external consultant to conduct the commercial study, to explore the business model and strategy. And also, we conduct the legal study to draft the contract model for the long-term sale and purchase agreement, and also the spot purchase and agreement among the ESCO members to facilitate the concept of bringing the LNG to the ASEAN. And from this concept, we can envisage that in the future, once we have this LNG destination free in place, we can see that when the LNG cargo come from any other region come to this ASEAN, and it can be divert and deliver the natural gas to all the 10 countries in the ASEAN. So this would be the way that we can increase our national energy security from the Trans-ASEAN Gas Pipeline project, plus the LNG as serving as the virtual pipeline. So this will link all of the 10 countries in ASEAN together and have more energy security. And for this table, we can see that apart from the TAGP pipeline that I already showed you in the green pipeline. We also foresee that in the future, by the year 2025, we can see that the additional capacity of LNG regasification in ASEAN would be for more than 40 million tons per annum. And this would make ASEAN be the significant LNG player in the future. And for my conclusion that the ASCO would contribute meaningfully for the energy security by driving sustainable petroleum collaboration. And we also look for collaboration within the ASCO member and also the organization outside the ASCO. And this is the end of my presentation. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation of the ASCO. That provide us the insightful on the overview of the ASCOP and also the ongoing ASCOP project, including it is noted worthy noted also about the accomplishment of the ASEAN pipeline, that the ASCOP project has achieved 3,670 kilometer pipeline length. And also in the future, we noted the strategic ASCOP in order to boost up the utilization of the gas in the ASEAN region, that are going to shift from the physically connected to be virtual connected, meaning you want to boost up the utilization of the LNG, and also the infrastructures on the regasification terminal for the LNG trading. And also some point also, another point is about the strategic to have a flexibility on the LNG market trading in the region in order to boost up also the LNG gas demand and supply to contribute what we said to energy security as described in the ASEAN Plan of Action 2016-2020. Thank you very much, Mr. Pramet. And then, as per the agenda indicated before, we would like to open the question and answer sessions. But before it's also good to hear another perspective, points of view from our expert from international organizations. So, firstly, I would like to invite Mr. Michael from APRAC also to share with us about his point of views and also inputs on what they have seen through the presentation of our two speakers before, Mr. Pinto and also Mr. Pramet. Mr. Michael, please.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah,
good
please,
afternoon.
we can hear
you. Yeah. Okay. Hello. Good afternoon to everyone. I'd like first to thank the two presenters presenting the outlook for the ASEAN region, as well as the projects under the ASCOP under the Trans-ASEAN Gas Pipeline. So basically, based on the ASEAN Outlook, it somehow presents the concern on gas imports of the ASEAN region, and by 2020 or 2022 and then 2029, depending on the different scenarios. So based on these results, somehow it will have an impact on energy supply security. So it should be the ASEAN region should focus on how to ensure supply security of gas, because when we look at the different forecasts of the different international organizations, natural gas will grow much faster than the other fossil fuel, meaning oil and coal. And for instance, the IEA, EIA, and even the Institute of Energy Economics of Japan, they all forecasted that gas will surpass coal in the future until 2040. But in the APEC region, wherein there are 7 member states who are also members of APEC, our outlook somehow the nat gas will surpass oil but not coal because of the ASEAN, because of the higher requirement of ASEAN for coal, specifically for power generation. But given the increasing volume of nat gas consumption globally as well as in the ASEAN region, it somehow creates a concern for how do we ensure supply security of gas. So in this context, it is somehow we can note that the development of regional networks in ASEAN for the gas, which is the Trans-ASEAN gas pipeline, this somehow somehow it would help the region on the aspect of supply security. But because of depleting reserves, and then there's no additional refines, among others, so other gas producers may slow down their production in the future. So that will create another concern. So the ASCOP, although we saw from the presentation of ASCOP that there are many member states building regasification as well as receiving terminals. These are positive indications that somehow the region is somehow looking at preparing for the eventual importation of gas. Like for instance, in the Philippines, the only source of gas will be depleted soon by 2022. So the Philippines now is building LNG receiving terminal, as well as Vietnam. Later on, Vietnam will also import gas. So in this context, the network that is already in place, we could somehow improve further such network. Maybe we could develop more FSRU as part of the network aside from the pipeline that could deliver immediately the gas to one member state to another member state. So another thing is, considering that we do have this concern already, which is indicated in the ASEAN Outlook, maybe the ASEAN region should also look at to have a gas security agreement, just like the APSA agreement. So cooperation, international cooperation would increase the supply security aspect, because they can share, they can borrow. Once there's a supply shortage, one member state can borrow from from another member state during disruption, among others. But one of the problems here globally is that because gas demand is increasing so much, the ASEAN region, once the ASEAN region starts to import gas, they will compete with other regions importing gas as well. And to think that we're really not yet sure whether there is enough investment that were put in on gas production in other regions, as well as on the regasification terminals to deliver LNG to other regions as well. And considering, if you're going to analyze the gas market, it's somehow the market is not that liquid compared with oil and coal. And we see that most of the contracts until now are on long-term contracts. There's still a destination clause, and somehow the price is linked to oil. So these are the issues that the region should also need to take into consideration and address later on once the region starts to import gas. And on the point of view of supply security, once the ASEAN region starts to import gas, diversification is one of the factors that would somehow increase or ensure greater supply security. I think that's my point that I would like to share in this webinar. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
I'll
you.
go back
Thank
to.
you so much, yeah. Thank you so much, Michael, providing us your point of views in terms of what should be undertaken by the regions in order, how to say it, to harness the energy security in ASEAN region. You bring up a point of views in terms of concern on the depleting resources. As you know, the gas resources is constrained, so the ASEAN also should think on how the utilization of gas also can be planned and can be strategized and also systematized in order in concern to the depleting resources of gas, but how in the short term can be also contribute to energy security in ASEAN. And also you noted about the your concern about the competitiveness of the gas compared to the coal and also oil. So we will address this issue also now ASCOP, as they have a plan in order to boost up the utilization of gas. But in your few points that this is not competitive if you compare it on the gas, and how we can bring forward the gas as our alternative resources. Thank you. And then I would like to invite Mr. I would also to hear from our another international organization perspective, which is coming from Mr. Edi Saputra. So I would like to please Mr. Edi Saputra to share your perspective.
Yeah, well, thank you, Pak Rio. And first of all, I would like to say thank you to ASEAN Centre of Energy for inviting me to this webinar. I think it's a pleasure for me to be here. And thank you to Pak Pinto and Kun Paramat for sharing the very good presentations, which I found quite useful. Yeah, I'd like to split my feedback into two parts. So the first one is on the fifth Asian Energy Outlook, and the second one is on the Trans-Asian Gas Pipeline. On the AEO, I think, well, generally I share the same view with the presentation that Pak Pinto shared. I think gas imports dependency in ASEAN will continue to increase, and it will be predominantly in the form of LNG imports. And this is driven not only by the gas demand growth, but I think more importantly by the decline in the existing supply. I mean, we're seeing very mature gas plays in Gulf of Thailand, in onshore Peninsula Malaysia, as well as in Java and Sumatra, for example, with kind of declining gas supply, and those are the key demand centers in the region. And I think I also share the same view. I generally agree that gas demand growth in ASEAN, it may not be as strong as the growth of coal, particularly in the power sector. And this is something that is unique for ASEAN, because globally we do expect gas to grow faster than oil and coal. Right, but this is due to the several factors which are unique to the Southeast Asian region. So the domination of coal, I think, will be very visible in the medium term, but in the longer term, I think we could expect that to start to taper off. As a result of this, I think ASEAN's LNG demand will continue to grow strongly. I think in Wood Mackenzie, we forecast the demand of the region will grow from 12 million tons today to around 35 million tons in 2025, and further to 74 million tons in 2035. And this works both ways, I think. So firstly, there is a clear need for ASEAN to ensure energy security. I think Michael has stressed this very, very strongly, and I strongly agree with it. And it's not only about securing LNG supply, but also that there is a need to expand the regas capacity in the region. And secondly, I think ASEAN also needs to realize that its position in the global energy market is becoming increasingly important, because we could expect ASEAN to be one of the top 5 LNG importers globally by 2025, right? So the region could take a more active role in this aspect. For example, instead of simply being a price taker, ASEAN could kind of come up with its own regional price index, which is more representative of the supply-demand balance of the region. That's my feedback for the first part on the ASEAN Energy Outlook. The second one on the Trans-Asian gas pipeline. Well, I think Kun Paramat has shared very insightful information on the TAGP, and I think TAGP is a very important initiative for ASEAN, because individually, countries in ASEAN, they have achieved a lot, but I think collectively there is still a lot of space to fill. So the AGP could provide a platform for ASEAN countries to work together as an organization collectively to ensure the energy security within the region. Well, notwithstanding that, I think the biggest flaw, the weakest point of the AGP is that its success or its completion, it depends almost wholly on the Natuna Delta field. And Natuna Delta field is very challenging to develop due to its high CO2 content and its high cost development. And the uncertainty around Natuna Delta, it has dragged out the whole Trans-Asian Gas Pipeline initiative for some years, right? So I think I would suggest to kind of put less focus on Natuna Delta for now. That's my suggestion for ASCOP on this aspect. Well, I'm not saying that it won't happen. I mean, with the advancement of CO2 processing technology and better fiscal terms, it may work in the future. But for now, I think the focus should be more on the LNG cooperation. And I'm glad to know that ASCOP has expanded the scope of the cooperation to include the LNG sector. And well, I heard about the plan to kind of remove destination restrictions for LNG delivered to ASEAN. I think that's a good idea, and that's feasible at the same time, because in the European market, for example, there's no destination restriction clause. In Japan recently, this year, Japan Fair Trade Commission, they've declared destination restriction and profit sharing requirement as something that is anti-competition, and it is illegal basically. But this applies basically for kind of FOB LNG sales and not to the DS LNG sales. Well, some other inputs that I'd like to highlight, I think, on the LNG sector, firstly is with the establishment of the FTA among the ASEAN members, and then the non-tariff trade barrier removal, as well as cross-border transportation agreement. I think it makes a lot of sense for ASEAN to promote intra-regional LNG trade within the region. I think distance-wise, it also makes sense, and it could provide a more competitive option. I think it's one of the low-hanging fruit that can be done. And then secondly, facility and infrastructure sharing, like importing LNG via other countries' terminal, for example, and using some swap arrangement to cover for that. Something that's feasible between Myanmar and Thailand, as well as Vietnam and Malaysia and Thailand, for example. And lastly, well, the development of regional price index, I think that's something that ASEAN could consider as well. So because, I mean, its LNG demand is expected to grow strongly, and its market share in the global LNG market will also increase. So having a price index or market that is more reflective of the supply-demand balance fundamental in the region is something that can be considered. And this goes well, I think, with the recent trend toward market liberalization in Singapore and Malaysia and Thailand, with the open access implementation, which could improve the kind of LNG trade and transaction and bringing in more liquidity into the market. Last but not least, I would like to point out the idea to cooperate in small scale LNG and distributed generation as well. I think apart from TAGP, ASEAN Power Grid is one of the key initiatives in ASEAN, which is useful to provide kind of balancing and added security in the power system within the region. But in order to improve electrification rate and provide electricity access to remote areas, I think small-scale LNG and deployment of distributed generation can be a more effective and a quicker way to meet that objective. Yeah. Well, I think those are all my comments and feedbacks, and I hand over again to Pak Rio as the moderator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Eddie, for your insightful point of views. A lot of suggestions, a lot of key solution. I mean, the key plan that can be put together with the ASCO plan and strategy in order to contribute in how to bring the gas able to contribute to the energy security in ASEAN. And you also highlighted a lot of new, I think, initiative that can be also taken into consideration by the ASCO, like the cross-border agreement and also sharing structures on the regasification infrastructures and also market pricing mechanism and also and so on. So I think this will be well taken by the ASCO, but we will also would like to check again with the representative of ASCO in response to the solution and also some suggestions from our panelists from international organizations. So, Mr. Paramat, please, we would like to hear some response from you. What is your perspective of the solution from our panelists?
Thank you,
please, Mr. Paramat.
When I heard, yes, I would like to thank you for the comment and suggestion on the TATP and of course right now as we expand the scope of the TATP from just only the pipeline to include the LNG, and we just have the name of the TATP just amend to the Trans-ASEAN Gas Partnership, that we can include both the pipeline and both the LNG. And it's very good comment that for the LNG would be another option for the ASCO members in the region, that we can thinking about the swap arrangement and to save the LNG shipping costs, and also for the small scale that in some country, for example in Cambodia, they would like to see the application of the small scale LNG, and for the countries such as Thailand or Singapore, because they have the quite a big capacity of LNG receiving terminal, we can thinking about the LNG break bulk cargo, that once the conventional cargo around 1,700 cubic meters cargo size come to this region, and it can load the LNG to Thailand terminal or Singapore terminal, and after that we can do the break bulk and send the small cargo, maybe 5,000 cubic meter vessel to the small area that maybe in the Cambodia or some island in the Indonesia or in the Philippines, that they would like to use the natural gas in the small amount, but they cannot get the access from the pipeline, so we can send in terms of the LNG instead. And this would be the option that may be easier to implement than just only to build a pipeline. This is the key thing that the ASCO is now exploring this kind of the options, whether it would be commercial and technical feasible. Thank you.
Mr. Paramat, to give us your very good response. And also we would like to again to encourage everyone, all the audience, please type address your question on the chat box on the GoToWebinar, so we can also address your question and give to the speakers in order to respond to your questions. And meanwhile, we also would like to check with Mr. Pinto, the speaker from the ASEAN Centre for Energy, in terms of the suggestion for our panelists about how the projection, because it is the ASEAN Energy Outlook project, the rise demand of the gas, but what is the influence in terms of the competitiveness of the gas compared to the coal, and also the pricing of oil and gas and also coal? So what is the projection? Is it a one key factor also included in the projection of the ACE in terms of the projections of the gas demand in the future? Please, Mr. Pinto.
Yeah. Hello?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Pak Rio. First, I would like to say thanks to Pak Eddie and Mr. Michael to give a very positive and very insightful feedbacks actually to our key findings from AO5. And I would totally agree with what being mentioned by Mr. Michael and Pak Eddie before, that the first is ASEAN natural gas growth is different with what happened in global trend. In global trend, we see that coal will be in ASEAN. We will see that coal is having more than natural gas, but in contrary, in global, natural gas is the most rapid growth. This is due to the plan of ASEAN member states to introduce more supercritical and ultra supercritical coal power plants. And also, I would like to highlight again what being said by Pa Eddie before about the the, the natural gas security in ASEAN is not only by from the growth of demand side, but also the decrease in primary production. It is I would totally agree with that, but however, in our modeling in ASEAN Energy Outlook, uh, we had, we choose to focus more on the demand side to give a clear message for the ASEAN member states that we can uh, we can postpone the depletion of natural gas if we can achieve what's being mentioned in the APIC target, which is reduction of energy intensity compared to 2005 level. So that's, I think that's two point of view. Both are complementary each other. So one is looking for the demand growth that will have an impact for the natural gas supply, natural gas security, but also from the production side, we can see that this would clearly affect the supply security of natural gas. That these 2 points will clear that in the future there will be a strong import dependency for natural gas in ASEAN. So that's a very insightful feedbacks actually from Pa Edi. I think that's all I can say right now. So I give it back to Pak Rio as the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peter, for your comprehensive response to the concern and also to the some key suggestion of our panelists for in our today's webinar. Everyone seems we are close to to the end of our webinar today. So again, I would like again to thank you for joining us into today's webinar, and hopefully you found this webinar very useful for you. And again, this is a kind reminder. So we're going to have another webinar in the next weeks. It will be held 6th December 2017 on Wednesday, that has a focus on what are the next steps for ASEAN on RE incentives. So please make sure that you will not be missing out the RE incentives of focus in our next webinar session. So again, closing, thank you for our speakers again for giving an insightful and sharing your insightful presentation and also point of views in order how to bring the gas resources as one of the alternative sources to balance the energy security in ASEAN region. Very good perspective, very good point of views, and it is all well taken. And again, thank you for time for joining us, and hopefully to see you again in the next occasion. So from the ASEAN Centre for Energy, we will publish all the recorded these webinars today in our website www.aseanenergy.org. So you can check further information about today's webinar, on our website. So again, from the ASEAN Center for Energy, I would like to thank you everyone and have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you and goodbye. Thank you, Mr. Pramet. Thank you, Mr. Michael. And Pak Edi, thank you, Pak Rio. Goodbye.